Hi everyone, this is going to be not a typical MKDev video because that's going to be completely unscripted and I don't really exactly know how it's going to turn out, but I felt that's going to be an appropriate format for what I want to do with you today. You all have heard about GitHub Copilot, that's the AI coding assistant from GitHub, and they announced recently, well, 2 months ago actually, GitHub Copilot X, that you see here on the page. It's basically a new version of GitHub Copilot that is powered by GPT-4, and it's a bit weirdly implemented because, as you know, regular Copilot is working via the comments in your code, but this Copilot X, they just split it into 4 different features that you need to request separately to be part of the beta test. And some of these features is, for example, you can get a chat inside the Visual Studio Code, not unlike ChatGPT, and you can also get some automated AI-powered pull request descriptions, as well as some AI-driven CLI command suggestions. I got access so far to 2 probably most exciting features of Copilot X. That's the chat part. That's basically gives you this ChatGPT-like experience inside Copilot, inside Visual Studio Code, and the CLI. And I'm not going to talk about CLI part, I will only talk about this chat experience. And I want to do an experiment. I want to actually use Copilot X with this presumably GPT-4 to deliver an actual feature for one of MKDev's repositories. And in parallel, I will also use a regular ChatGPT with GPT-4 to just have a comparison. I've been using GPT-4 and ChatGPT for my work since many weeks to generate different scripts, to just kind of substitute with Google to explain some code lines. And I'm really curious how it works inside Visual Studio Code with Copilot, because that's a way nicer integrated experience. I don't need to jump between my Visual Studio Code and its Safari window with the GPT. So what I'm going to do, we have at MKDev a website, Fodo.com. Basically, Fodo is our umbrella company that is behind MKDev, the cloud native and DevOps consultancy based in Europe, and a couple of other software service projects that we have. For example, Transcripto, which is voice-to-text service, and Claymora, which is a time tracker built to comply with European laws. So that's just a simple static web page. It's nothing more than, and I'm going to show you now, it's just basically an indexed HTML file with some CSS written with the Tailwind CSS. So there is not much real CSS. Here is just like this small little file, and then majority of CSS is auto-generated with the Tailwind CLI. And we deploy this static web page with Terraform. So we basically create here in main.tf an S3 bucket. And then we also upload all of these files for the website to S3 bucket using Terraform with the simple AWS S3 bucket object thingy. And on top of that, we connect this bucket with the Cloudflare so that we get like free TLS and some other small nice features from the Cloudflare, like we actually like CDN, but we primarily use it because of the TLS, because the S3 buckets, they don't really offer you automatic TLS. My idea now is that right now we deploy this manually, and I'd like to deploy it automatically. And we are using GitHub Actions at MKDev for our internal projects for the mkdev.me and Transcript and Claymora. And I'd like to deploy changes to the static website as well as GitHub Actions, even though there are not too many changes on the day-to-day basis. Still would be nice to just push to the main branch and get this deployed. And deployment would consist of generating final CSS file and running Terraform apply. And what I'm gonna do, I will use GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT in parallel to support me with doing this task. So let's get started. I have here GitHub Copilot, and you might notice that my Visual Studio Code is green. That's because to use this GitHub Copilot chat, you need to install Visual Studio Code Insiders, which is like a nightly build of Visual Studio Code. And then you need to install extensions for the nightly Copilot, and then you get this plugin inside. And important thing to note is that you still need to pay for Copilot to get access to these beta features. So if you request them, requirement is that you're already paying like $10 per month for the Copilot, which I'm doing happily. And the reason I'm so excited about this experience is because regular Copilot that you pay for is based on the GPT 3, I think, not even 3.5, and it kind of lags behind GPT-4 a lot. So I found myself constantly using this thing here with the ChatGPT and GPT-4 instead of using the Copilot. So I'm kind of like, I'm paying for Copilot, but I'm not really using it that much because it's not as good as the GPT-4 with ChatGPT. So I'm really curious how it's going to work with this new chat capability. I did some small tests earlier this week, but now I'm going to use it for real. All right. So first thing I'm going to ask is to create me a GitHub Actions workflow that will do what I just mentioned, will create me a final CSS file and run Terraform apply more or less. And as my co-founder Pablo is telling, you should always be polite with the AI. Could you please create a GitHub Actions workflow that is going to have 2 stages. Build stage simply takes an input CSS file and tailwind CSS configuration and renders out a final CSS file. Deployment stage runs Terraform apply with automatic approval. Deployment stage should only happen on the main branch. Note that Terraform is using both AWS and Cloudflare providers. Please configure access to those APIs accordingly. So I will submit this request, and in parallel, let me just paste it also to GPT-4. And I need to press it like this. What I like about this chat experience here is that it's actually pretty fast. So it already did everything. And let's see. So that's going to install Node.js, which is fine. It will install all the dependencies, which is not fine because I actually don't have any package.json in my repository. Maybe I should have, but I don't want to for now because it's a really simple website. And then it will do npx tailwind css build input css, which is legitimate, but not exactly how I would do it probably. And then it needs to upload an artifact. Okay. And then it actually did a proper detection that it needs to run deploy stage only on the main file, which is good. And then it will download the artifact. It will configure AWS credentials, configure Cloudflare credentials, initialize Terraform, and run Terraform apply. And it actually gives me also an explanation of what exactly it's gonna do with the with which environment variables and secrets I need to supply, which is nice. Now if we look here in the ChatGPT, we see a slightly different workflow, and honestly I actually like this one a bit more because I do prefer to have my environmental variables to be on top. And well, it also installs me npm, which is fine. It uses the npx, checks out the code and set up Terraform, and look how much simpler the deploy stage is, and simpler in not a good way because it actually did not configure me any AWS stuff because it will just use the AWS access key ID and access it. Well, now that I look at this, the ChatGPT version is smaller, more concise, and it actually removes some steps that actually should not be even needed, because for AWS provider, if you have access key ID and access key environment variables, you don't need to do anything extra. Like Terraform will just use them to do the Terraform plan and apply. Here, for some reason, GitHub Copilot offers me to run this configure AWS credentials action, which I actually need, but not in the case of using static credentials, which is not that nice actually. And it also offers me to create like Cloudflare CFG for whatever reason. It's not actually needed, because if this environment variable is there, then Cloudflare Terraform provider will just work without any issues. So far, similar results for the build stage, not such a good result for the deploy stage. And worth pointing out also is that I told that I want to run deployment on the main branch. I did not say I want to run build on the main branch. ChatGPT configured the workflow that it only works for the pushes to the main branch, both for the build and deploy, while Copilot did it only for the deploy, which is correct. So it limits deployment to only main branch. But in the end, if you again think about it a bit better, if it only happens on the main branch, so there is no way this workflow is gonna be even triggered on a pull request. So that's what Copilot did here. So actually, like, this doesn't make that much sense. It's just an extra safety net. So far it's a bit, I cannot say that ChatGPT won this round, but I like more concise code. I like as little code as possible, and ChatGPT offered me this smaller workflow. What I don't like in both cases is that if you look at the actions that both tools recommended to me, they're old. So if you look at the checkout code, actions checkout, it's using version 2, and the latest version is version 3. It's also using the very old Terraform version. In case of the Copilot, it offers me 1.05, and at the moment of recording this video, the latest version is 1.46. So that's old. I don't want to install Terraform versions. I prefer this because it just uses the latest one, and it will rely on my provider's TF log instead of kind of forcing me to use particular version inside the workflow configuration. What I'm also not so happy about in case of Copilot X is that it uses this download artifact. I actually don't need this. Like, I want to create a CSS file and run Terraform apply. I don't need to have like a separate exchange of artifacts. It's hard for me to say just by looking at this workflows which one is going to work or not. I think both of them will fail. There is like this -o this, for example, is not how my repository is structured. But what is important here is that ChatGPT doesn't even have a chance to get where this output CSS will be located, but Copilot X is actually running inside my application. So it could have looked at the repository and say, well, you have the site directory, you have the source, you have main CSS, maybe you want to store the CSS file in here. But no, it just also kind of dropped it into some random this directory, or in this case in output CSS. Alright, lots of differences between these two workflows, even though they both use GPT-4, but that's normal. Even like if you just ask the same question to ChatGPT or GPT, it will kind of give you different results for the same prompt. What I want to do next is I want to understand what is NPX. And in case of ChatGPT, it actually, look, I missed this initially. ChatGPT tells me that I have to adjust this path as needed, which is nice because that's true, I need to adjust it. It could not guess where my files are going to be located, but it told me like, yeah, well, adjust this part. Copilot X, my programming copilot, my pair programming buddy with like huge brain in the cloud, it did not try to give me this context. Now, I'm not a front-end guy. I have no idea about the modern toolchain. I'm using Tailwind CSS exactly because I don't want to write any CSS myself. So I have no idea what is NPX. Now let me ask, please explain to me what does the NPX part of this workflow doing. And I'm also going to ask the ChatGPT. Okay, so it used to run a Node.js package without having to install it globally on your system. In this, well, I actually don't care because it's a CI system, so I can install it globally. It's used to run Tailwind CSS package, which is utility for generating. And then it explains to me what is Tailwind CSS, which arguments it accepts, etc., etc. GPT-4 gives me also lots of information about how this command is working, which is fine. What I see here clearly, the speed with which GPT-4 and Copilot X chat is generating this information is like completely different. Like it still gives me text, and Copilot X just gave me something in a second. So okay. Well, you know, while ChatGPT is still generating, well, it actually just finished. What I don't like, I don't really want to use this npx thing. I'd like to install it globally and just use Tailwind CSS as a globally available CLI. Plus, I want Copilot to remove this this weird artifact exchange. Please adjust the build stage to avoid using npx. Just install this globally. And I will give the same here. So this is the modified build stage, which is nice. It does not give me the full workflow again. It just gives me the adjusted part, which is good. Now please adjust the resulting workflow to avoid using artifacts. Just save, just generate final CSS file inside size source main CSS and deploy with Terraform. And I intentionally keep my prompts short because I want to test how much it will guess. I don't want to kind of guide this through every little step, because then I could just write it myself. Now let's see. It does. Okay, so it actually dropped the build stage, which probably makes sense. Like, I don't need a separate build stage. I don't want to handle exchange of artifacts between the jobs, because that's how GitHub Actions working. And it's actually nice that Copilot understood that if I don't do artifact exchange, then I have to keep it inside the one build job. So that's a good guess from the Copilot X. Now let's see the ChatGPT. It's giving me the correct, well, more or less the same workflow. So it's like npm install tailwind css -j and then tailwind build, which is good. It does not handle the scenario with artifacts, so it keeps telling me to use the two stages. But how does this file end up in the deploy stage? It doesn't. There is no way, right? So I'm installing it. I'm generating the final CSS here, and it's never gonna end up in the deploy stage. So let's complain. I need final CSS file to be located inside CSS main CSS, and it needs to be available during the deploy stage. I would also like to avoid using any artifact upload, download. So let's just stick to the single deploy stage. Enter doesn't work for me because of reasons, I don't know. While ChatGPT is doing its work, let's think about the next steps. So earlier I said that actually I like ChatGPT version more, but now that I realize that it gave me a faulty workflow actually in ChatGPT because it did not handle this artifact upload download, and Copilot X did it, I'm a bit uncertain what's actually better here. But, well, let's think about it. In general, this workflow is probably going to work if I have secrets in the place, and if I will handle some other Terraform configurations. But, and that's a big but, is that I should not be using AWS access keys and secrets inside my GitHub Actions workflow. That's not the most secure way to do it, because I don't want to have any static AWS credentials hanging around in my GitHub repository configuration, even if it's inside secrets. What I want to do, I want to use OIDC integration between GitHub Actions and AWS, which means that AWS will simply trust github.com to access APIs via IAM role. So I need basically an IAM role that will trust the github.com, and it will trust only particular repository and even only particular branch. In this case, there are no static credentials involved at all. It will just kind of create a temporal credentials because it's allowed to assume this role. And that's something I know that needs to be done in this way. I know that that's the best practice. That's how you should do your GitHub Actions workflows. But if I would not know this and I would just rely on Copilot X as my pair programming body, it would let me down here, right? It would not give me the optimal configuration. So, but okay, let's assume that your pair programming AI assistant is not supposed to be smarter than you. You just, in this case, I happen to know more about how this should be done.
There are no challenges that we couldn't overcome. Whether it is immediate infrastructure problems or planning a future project, we won't simply answer your questions. We become a part of your team to help you complete the mission. Our solutions consider the interests of your business and the combined expertise of the industry, as our staff is made up of more than a dozen experts in different areas who share decades of field-tested experience and knowledge with you.
I would like to connect to AWS APIs using IAM role via OIDC integration between GitHub and AWS. Please adjust the workflow accordingly. And same for ChatGPT. And meanwhile, let me check. Well, that's just my language tool, which is just lovely that it blocks the button. I should, well, can I somehow delete it? No. Well, that's embarrassing because I can actually press the button now. And also press some that ChatGPT is now generating something. Well, look, I repeated my previous request. And now it creates me a new workflow. Now, of course, now that I told it that, like, well, yes, it sounds like you want to build CSS file and deploy it within the same job. Yes, that's what I wanted originally, but I did not specify it in prompt well enough, so I did not guess it from the first attempt. But now it knows. So now it does the correct job. It does the setup Terraform, Terraform in, and Terraform apply. It still uses the old actions. Well, what can we do? Now let's submit this OIDC part, and let's check what GitHub Copilot answered to us. Sure, here's an example of how you can modify the workload to use the role. Now, honestly, that's a bit frustrating because, yes, this part is okay, role to assume, role session name, that's fine. Web identity token, I'm not supposed to provide it. That's the whole idea, is that web identity token is actually fetched by AWS SDK. So that should be part of this action. And then I use this configured with credentials community action quite a lot, and it's capable of doing this properly. So you're not supposed to do this web identity token part here. But okay, at least it adjusted it somehow. And then it does something that I don't want it to do, because I never said that please pass the CSS file as a variable, but it misunderstood me probably, so it's like, yeah, now I will pass it as a variable. No, I don't want this. Let's ask it to adjust. First, I don't have web identity token as a secret. This should be handled by the community action. So please adjust accordingly. Also, please remove passing of CSS file as a variable. My code is already doing this automatically. No idea why I need to actually specify that my code is already doing this automatically. Like, I'm trying to talk to it to like a human, but it's not a human. Like, I don't need to give it all this context. Now let's see what this one did. So this one is using, and look how much more explanation ChatGPT is giving to me, because Copilot X is like, yes, here is like one paragraph of text, like try to figure out the rest yourself, but GPT-4 actually gives me so much information. So yes, it tells me to use this action. It's actually like it was not used before. As I said, like we don't need this configured with credentials action if we just have these two static environment variables. That was the wrong doing on Copilot X side. Before you proceed, it actually tells me what I need to do on the AWS part. So I need this IAM role to exist, and I need this to be configured in a certain way. And now comes my new updated action. There's only now Cloudflare API token, which is nice. There is now this new configured with credentials thingy, which is role to assume and role session name. Note actually does not ask me for any web identity token because I don't need this, because that's the whole idea. And then it gives me some more tips and some more explanations. That's actually pretty nice explanations again here. So what about here? It keeps, yeah, well, that's just not okay, right? Because now it tells me, yeah, well, please still take web identity token, but I don't need this identity token here. Why does it keep pushing this to me? So I'll need to adjust this myself in any case. But I did remove the variable, so that's nice, I guess. At this point, honestly, again, ChatGPT actually gave me more context and gave me a better workflow after it removed the artifacts part, and Copilot X just tries to help me, but it fails to be like useful. Like, obtained, it tells here OIDC token obtained from the communication action. I don't get this part. So let's see. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Copilot is just doing the right thing here. Let's check the documentation for this one. Let's check the first example in the documentation. First of all, again, version 2 is the one that we need. We don't need version 1. And it's just role to assume. That's how it's supposed to work. You just tell GitHub Actions, please assume this IAM role. That's it. No need to pass any token, because token is generated inside the action. But alright, so at this point, really, more or less the same result. I cannot say that Copilot X is like 2 times worse, but clearly GPT-4 with ChatGPT has better outcomes, like on average so far. It gives me a more concise workflow, which I like, because I don't like all of this messy thing with like this args auto-approve. I like just compare this part, right? Terraform apply minus auto-approve, 2 lines. Here it gives me like whole 5 lines with some extra action. Even though I cannot say what of this is going to work, because I would actually need to test it, which I'm not gonna do now. But, well, okay. That's fine. At least benefit of Copilot X is that I get this integrated experience, right? So I don't need to jump to this browser window, even though I have a big enough screen to do it. But there are some other nice things inside Copilot X that ChatGPT definitely does not have. First of all, in this chat window, I can basically go here and copy the contents here, which I can do also in ChatGPT, or I can insert the contents of this snippet here into the current file on the right at the cursor, or I can click here and I can insert all of this into a new file, and then I can save this file. And note how it just offered me a random location for this file. So again, it's not that smart. Actually, like GitHub Actions workflow is supposed to be in .github/workflows directory, which GitHub should know and GitHub Copilot X should know. So why does it offer this like at random location? Again, it's like not that helpful, but I can save it in any location I want, right? At least I have this nice little button here to do this. So let me close this one. The second nice thing, which is actually really nice in this Copilot X, is that I can ask it to work with the existing code. And that's something this old version of Copilot does not have, is this comments. Like you never actually know on in which context it operates. Like when you write the comment here, and I still have this old version running. Like if you write something here, like does it take this part of the file into account, or only something below the comment, or does it analyze other files? We don't know. So what I want to do with this OIDC integration, I need to configure an IAM role on AWS part to allow GitHub Actions to perform all the like S3 bucket and all of this like float objects, all of these permissions. But I don't want to handcraft this policy. So what I can do instead, I can open my main TF file, and that's the file where all of the AWS actions are happening. Well, most of them. I can select all of the contents here, and I can say, please, you have to be always polite, please analyze selected code and suggest an IAM policy required to manage all of those Terraform resources. It correctly understands what it's doing, sets up website hosting, uploads files, and then gives me the policy. Which is funny because I think this policy is okay, it's scoped properly, but why there are so many actions? Actually, like put bucket replication. Like I never ask for the bucket replication. There is nothing like this in my Terraform code. Intelligent technical, many of those IAM actions are just wrong. I don't need all of them. And yesterday I tried exactly the same request, and it gave me a way better policy with like 6-7 actions, with the same prompt more or less. So that's curious, right? It's like, why is it doing this like random information? Because my assumption is that now that Copilot X has access to my code and I can just select code and ask to work with this code, it can do something more predictable than just create whatever 30 actions in IAM policy that are never used. But fine. Let's now select this code. Please take this selected code, analyze it for which IAM actions are used, and extend the previous policy with these new actions. Let's see. And that's something I cannot do in ChatGPT because it doesn't have access to my code, and I cannot just copy and paste all of this code into this window here on the left because it will tell me that input is too big, which is now Copilot X has this competitive advantage because it operates with this text here. Now let's look at the final policy. Again, this huge sense like pointless list of policies, which I like half of them at least I don't need. Then it added Route 53 management, which is good. It like change resource record sets, get hosted zone, release resource record sets. It even adjusted this to have like a dynamic part for the hosted zone, which is nice. And Cloudflare management. I might be wrong, but you cannot manage Cloudflare resources via AWS because that's a separate cloud provider. So that's just like, why are you doing this? Probably because you're a language model and you don't have such much understanding of what's going on. I don't think you can manage Cloudflare from AWS IAM role. So not sure if the last part is correct. Yeah, you're correct that Cloudflare is not an AWS service. And now it gives me JavaScript code to do what? Here's how you could use Axios. That's just too confusing. That's random, right? It does not take context into an account. It tries to be helpful, but it's doing something that is just makes no sense. Let me try to actually select this code and ask GPT-4, please analyze Terraform code below and give me an IAM policy with permissions to manage AWS resources in this code. Now, problem is that it might complain that the input is too big. Oh, in this case, it's actually pretty small, so it will try to do its best. While it's doing it, let's draw some conclusion from this. So Copilot X, for sure, it's good to have this chat inside Visual Studio Code. It tries to be useful, but after this short experiment, I trust this as much as I trusted regular Copilot, because it's basically the same thing in a way nicer UI with this chat window, but it just offers me lots of garbage, to be honest. And when it doesn't offer me garbage, it offers me something that is not optimal. So it does not give me the best way to connect from GitHub Actions to AWS. It does not kind of give me the latest versions of all the actions. It's just, I still need to do quite a lot myself, and I still need to know quite a lot myself to be able to build a pipeline out of this. It's a good boilerplate code, but it's nowhere near to be a working code. And I'm not sure even all of these inputs for actions are even correct, because judging by this web identity token, which is not needed here, I think a lot of this is just wrong. Now let me get back to the ChatGPT, and look, this is what I mean. ChatGPT or GPT-4 took the same Terraform code, and it gave me an IAM policy that does not have any Cloudflare IAM policies, because why would they have them? Just makes no sense. So GPT-4 again did a way better job here, and I think I'll stop there. For me, it's clear who is the winner, even though there is no winner because it's more or less the same company, same APIs. But in short, GPT-4 ChatGPT is still way better than Copilot X. I actually don't think Copilot X with this chat version is using GPT-4, or if it does, it's quite limited, because, and I'll show you why, if you ask here, where is Munich located, it will just say, nah, I cannot assist you with program-related questions. So it's limited in a way that it's kind of scoped to programming problems. And I think if it's using GPT-4, which they say it's using GPT-4, then maybe this limitation of like this scoping of what it can do prevents it from doing a better job than GPT-4 inside ChatGPT. Because here is nice, it works nice. That's the policy I'll probably want. I don't think I need to get the health check, but maybe I need. In any case, it's significantly better than what Copilot X gave to me. That's something I can work with, and with Cloudflare permissions, that's something I cannot work with. And that's the whole point. But to be fair, Copilot X is still a beta preview. I got access like 1 week ago. They've been rolling it out in the last 1.5 to 2 months. So it's pretty rough of the edges. It's a way nicer experience in terms of UI. It's definitely a step up from regular Copilot, which works via comments in the code. And probably it works way better for the actual application code, because I'm using it for my DevOps job, right? So I'm not writing application code as much as a software developer. And I would actually like to test it on some of the Ruby applications we have at MKDF, like the transcript MKDF and the Claymora. Would be curious how it will work there. But for the DevOps work, it seems like I will not lose my job this month at least, because that's just not good so far, but it's useful. It's like a junior assistant that sits next to you and types code for you, but then you need to do the actual job to make all of this working. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you like this experiment of the unscripted video where I just sit and talk to you and show you how things work and experiment. Tell me in the comments if you want more of videos like this, because I can actually, we can do more of such sessions, trying out different tools, discussing them in details, reviewing them. Don't forget to subscribe to MKDev channel. Don't forget to click the like button, to click on the bell to get notifications about new videos, and check out our website. We are DevOps and Cloud Native Consultancy based in Munich, Germany. We help companies with the public cloud, Kubernetes, Cloud Native, and DevOps challenges, so we can join your team to solve your challenges, or we can also do a short 4 to 6 weeks audit of infrastructure, tell you how to refactor your infra automation and reduce your cloud costs. And we can also do some trainings for you in case your team needs to skill up on some topics like Argo CD or Kubernetes or AWS, you name it. Thanks for watching.
Do you think your project infrastructure is well set and maintained? We know for sure there is always room for improvement. If you are uncertain where to begin, let's first do an audit of what you already have. We will review your setup from every angle: performance, cost, security, high availability, automation, and provide you with a detailed roadmap of which direction your infrastructure should go, generate concrete tasks for you to implement, or even take on your infra entirely, if you let us, of course.